And I'm going to draw from the book I've mentioned already, which I'm very proud to say won the UK's award for Best Management Book for Innovation a couple of years ago, and so is, albeit written by an educationalist, something that seems to resonate for those who are working in a more obviously business or management world. Now, beware of anybody who rocks up on your doorstep and says there are 8 simple things that you can do. And rule 9, I give you in advance, is make up your own rules, all right? But what I'm going to try and do here is draw together some of the evidence, some of the literature that makes this a sensible thing to think. And if you think it's a sensible thing to think, then there are some actions that you might choose to take. So my argument is that given what we know about the world and the way the mind works and how change happens, then there are some things that we can do more of and some things we can do less of. But nobody can, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make her drink. So, you know, it's really down to us to decide whether we want to do that. It's not simple, it's often complicated, and it's very complicated because it's an emotional as well as an intellectual thing. So we're constantly going to be dealing with that, and that will make us think certain things. Darwin's conclusion was, I'm sure you know, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. So I guess one immediate question is, so how do you get people to change? What causes people to change? In the 80s and 90s, there was an unfashionable, or I think unfashionable theory of change, that you needed a kind of what was called a burning platform. That's an image of a burning platform. It's still used, I have to say, by not always very attractive leaders and managers as a way of getting people to do what you want them to do. And so it's still used by parents, trying to get our kids to do what we want them to do. You basically make life so uncomfortable wherever they are by withdrawal of privileges, lack of resource. No, I won't drive you to the, if you're a parent. I'm a parent, by the way. That change is forced. But it's not terribly humanistic, is it? So, I mean, I guess the situation there is, well, you either jump and hopefully survive in an oil slicky sea, or you don't. So I'm not talking about that. I'm going to be talking about some other things that might be interesting to us as we think about this. Before I talk at all more, I'd love you just to turn to a neighbour on the table. I'd like you to locate what I'm going to say in something that has genuinely changed for you in the last whatever period you want to set on it. So I'm going to invite you just to say hi and sort of 30 seconds each, okay? Something that's changed for me is, and what I've learned is, and just before you get started, please just moderate from, we didn't lay on any counselling for you today. So if you're feeling in a really bad place and it's right up there, then just maybe that's not the thing to go for today. By the same token, if you're, seriously worried about the procurement of paper clips, well, that's possibly at the other end, not the kind of thing. So just bring it into the middle and make it clear to your colleague whether it's personal and not to be shared or whether it's up for conversation with others, okay? The change that you were talking about could have been in a box that you would call good change, or it could have been in a box that you were calling bad change, or possibly an interesting box somewhere in the middle. It's a bit, not sure about that, but you've got a view. You've got a kind of perhaps a moral view almost of it. Or it could be significant. They're going to relocate me. And my nearest and dearest is very poorly. Or it could be minor. I'm going to have a new haircut. No, maybe that's not minor, but you know what I mean. It could be, sorry, that's serious, okay. I'm going to have to vary my route to work because the road works. That kind of thing. It could be personal, something that's about me. It could be social, something about me where I live. I was talking to a colleague, it's being seen as a dormitory town and I don't want it to be. That would be an example of a social change. But most importantly, it's whether or not it's desired or not desired. So is it something that your gut reaction is, yeah, I can work with this, I like the sound of this, or not? And just hold that last category in your head. So it's going to be particularly important as we go through this journey together. There are a number of things, and I'm going to just through picture and 3 quick little activities, some of which, if you've seen me before, you'll be familiar with, just clear the ground over. Perhaps the most powerful element of how we react to change is our personality. So the degree to which we like taking risk, I mean, is that you? Just if you feel that's metaphorically you, just show a hand, will you? If you feel that's actually you, because you're a fantastic extreme rock climber, okay. If you feel that's definitely not you, will you put a hand up? Fantastic. If you feel that you're somewhere in the middle, okay. And if you're somebody who never puts up your hand when you're asked to put your... Oh, thank you. Then great. So psychologists would call this openness to experience. And it's quite an interesting psychological construct. So the good news is that you can think you're one thing, but you can actually, through a series of things that I'm going to be suggesting, you can change. If you were just kind of stuck, well, I'm no good, I can't take risks, then you'd be stuck. Well, I've been working in the Middle East quite a lot recently, and there's a lovely school I work with that every year runs something it calls Risky June. Isn't that a great idea? It's the principle saying, you have permission to take risks, and I'll be right there supporting you. Okay? At every level. It's just lovely. It's just so that everything they do during June is risky in some sort of way. I love that. So now, those of you who did see me last time will have had a go at this, so forgive me. It's just possible that you've forgotten anyway, because life moves on. But what I want to show something else about the way the mind works here is, could you just choose one of those cards, okay, to the exclusion of the other four? Everybody pick one? Okay, and as I did last time, I'm going to just predict which one you have chosen. Is that sensible? Logical? Believable? Shanti did tell me that she'd assembled the finest minds in the whole area here. But clearly you had a weary day yesterday, did you? Yeah. By the way, I had a lovely Anzac Day. It was a real privilege to be here. And I was just saying to colleagues by me how extraordinary it is to have men and women of all ages and all nationalities taking part. I went to the early dawn service in Melbourne. It was very, very moving. And somehow to get the tone right as well. It's a really difficult thing to talk about, isn't it? War and life and death and peace is really, really difficult. And then I had a very strange experience of just delaying you a little bit for a second. You play some strange football game here as well. And I watched until my mind was boggling. People who seem to be running around in all sorts of directions. Were they going to pass? Were they going to kick? Were they going to do... But hey, I enjoyed that too. So that was a nice little bit of cultural awareness. Now that was just a stalling activity. Now, those of you who are of sound mind have figured out that I can't possibly predict what you've chosen. Is that right? And you've jumped ship and chosen another one. Is that right? Okay. So just close your eyes, and when you look up, I'll have removed your card. Close your eyes, and it's gone. They've all gone. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is a Scottish educational philosopher, Andy Clark. It's a lovely image of him, and I keep going back to this because I haven't got a better one yet, but when I do, I'll use that. And it's to show the human mind's extraordinary ability not to notice. Okay? So as a psychologist, I'd say it's inattentional blindness. Okay? It's like you don't notice that everybody else is driving the same make of car as you until you change your car. Isn't that right? Okay? And then you buy a new item of clothing which you think is unique and special, and damn it, somebody else has got it. And probably they had it yesterday, but you've only noticed it today because you're tuned in a way. So the reason for showing you this is, one, to show you how hopeless the human mind is. You know, we're easily distracted, easily stop noticing. But two, if you want to tune in, then there's something about, if Darwin was sitting here and he were talking to an imagined psychologist friend, something about dealing with change is noticing. It's just being able to notice in a way that some of your colleagues aren't, because that's going to give you prior warning. Think about it evolutionarily. I have to notice that there are slightly fewer this time of year than there were last time I was out hunting. Why? Because I'm trend alerting. And that's really important to be able to notice. This is a Japanese neuroscientist, another take on how hopeless the human mind is. So let's give you a go then. From top left to top right, would you read out, you say out loud the color of each word, starting now. Okay, you got the point. First of all, you think, here's another silly puzzle that Bill's asking you to do. And then, and thanks, guys, if you've done it before, but still found it difficult. That's nice, too. Then you thought, well, maybe he got it wrong. Maybe he meant to say the color as in the color, or the color as in what the word said. And we've got a symbol, and symbolic as in language, and color as in real. That's what that color is. But that's perceptual, because your yellow may be my orange. I don't know. But the point is, what happened to your performance? Slow down. Slow down. So why is that interesting? Well, that is modeling apparently conflicting information, isn't it? What happens when you're going through a period of change? You get more and more and more things that you can't classify. It's kind of ambiguous. I don't know. It might be good, might be bad, might be scary, might be interesting, might be a great possibility. Oh, good, they're going to remove my funding. You know, that's an opportunity for me. Or, oh, heck, they're going to reduce, you know. So all of that is very real, this. And certainly we know that just kind of giving out an instruction doesn't work, does it? You can't just tell people. Well, you can on the burning platform model, but not with consenting adults. It's a two-way street, isn't it? There needs to be some dialogue. That's the tragedy of teaching, isn't it? You know, I said I taught him to whistle, not that he'd learned. You know, many of us who've been going through teaching for our lives in some sort of way have found that to be true. So I'm going to offer you 8 things about which I think there is a really strong evidence base. And then I'm going to just throw out a possible you might like to. So if you believe that, you might like to try that. And that's going to be the structure of the remaining time together. So, Alvin Toffler, come across him? Wonderful book called Future Shock, which is 60 years old now, something like that. 60, no, maybe more like 30 years old. But he was predicting a world, this is pre-computers, he was predicting a world that was very different from the one that we know. And he said that change itself is changing, essentially. That it's happening, so his example, lots of examples were that in the past, you had the kind of seed-to-seed cycle, or you had at least an annual sense of time, patches of time moves on, or maybe it was a little more than that. You know, a new product cycle was actually half-yearly, or there were upgrades, not as there are now, kind of on a daily basis from some new piece of computer programming, but maybe monthly. There was a kind of vague sense in which you were in control. You may or may not have been in control, but time was kind of measured out in, you could look at it abstractly. Now, and he was imagining that, he's a futurologist, now it's kind of dazzling, isn't it? The speed and the depth and the complexity at which something changes around you is such that, and here's the important thing, if it's fast and deep, it tends to deny us the one thing that we absolutely need to deal with change, which is time, processing time, yeah? I can come to terms with most things if I have a bit of time, and I don't have that. So that's why people are fearful. And the argument that Alvin Toffler makes is that it's as if you've just had a road accident or lost somebody close to you. It's as if you are in shock. So the thought of the future, the being of thinking about the future, puts you in a state of shock. And that is, of course, a difficult part of the mind to have available to you, or in fact, not a helpful part of the mind if you're trying to do something complex. It's the fight or flight response, isn't it? Yeah? So if somebody comes up to me, I'm not going to do this, and threatens to hit me, then my fight or flight response cuts in. And I think, is she stronger than me? Will she eat me? Can I run faster than her? She will eat me, she's just told me. So I have to decide whether to leg it or to attack. And I'm going to call on, I'm not going to send a prescription order, but I need some adrenaline and some cortisol and some other things quite quickly. And that's going to give me a short-term advantage or a short-term boost, yeah? Now, if that's your state of being, it's very costly. That's where, do you know there's the incidence of young people's mental illness and general unhappiness is very high at the moment. So you can read PISA telling you how advanced and wonderful Singapore is, but you need to look at the statistics about what some young people are going through there. You can read, yeah? You see where I'm going with this? So it's not something we want to be in all the time. So what do? Do you just say, oh, change? I think not. I mean, I think I was trying to encourage you to think, so the more you can say change, if I just think about it fearfully, is unhelpful. if I can try and bring it something closer to me, one step closer to me, not leave it as a, you know, it's an unknown, then I think you're beginning to notice and have some ownership about it. Now, why is this the case? Well, long story, and we'll go into it, but there are various approaches to describing change. This is the classic. Anybody who's been through business school will have learnt this, and it goes back to, I think it was around 1962, and it's Everett Rogers, and he's talking about the diffusion of innovation in agricultural innovation in the States. And he's talking about how any new idea, any agricultural idea, you know, mechanization of some kind, intensification of some kind, you get a small number of, yeah, I'm up for that, and then a smallish number that's rather convenient because it's a bell curve that totals up to 16% of people who say, yeah, kind of count me in, I'll be in the first wave, and then there's this lovely category at the end, which I think is one of his great gifts, really, the laggard. Okay, and if you were at business school or when change management folk were out there in the 90s, you would have said, it's my job to persuade every damn laggard to come round and see the world the way I see it. Therein lies madness. That's not the way you do it, is it? If that's how you think of your leadership, then you might as well take an early retirement note now. Or go off and spend more time with the family, whatever you want to do. Because actually for most of us, the lived experience of change is, if only I could do that to it. You know, I'll deal with that, and then I'll move on to the next bit. It's not like that, is it? In fact, you hear people in organizations saying things like, will they just leave me alone? I've just done this, and now she's asking me to do that, and that, and that. And if you start from that perspective, you're on the back foot. And you will be. And you will be fearful and all the things that Alvin Toffler talked about. Because change is like that, isn't it? Yeah, you've just breasted the curve, as it were, for one thing, and another thing comes in, and another, and another. So you might as well open the mind to that's the way it is. If that's the way it is, then my strategy for dealing with it is going to be kind of different, isn't it? And in fact, a nice different strategy is not the bell curve, but it's more the influenza virus. And this is Malcolm Gladwell's thinking. If anybody read The Tipping Point? So another model, and I think a more helpful model for change, is not of a bell curve, but of a tipping point, of a kind of, you're moving along, and then zoom, suddenly it's got traction, it's got buy-in. And I think that's, in a sense, perhaps what you're seeing in the way you're evolving the network here. This is, of course, the New York subway, as it was a couple of decades ago. And the example, it's one of the examples that Malcolm Gladwell gives. And he talks about how the problem, the presenting problem, was of a subway that was old and underused, lots of fare evasion, and a very fearful place to be at different times of the day, and a pretty horrible place to be if you had to travel back on it late at night. So what do? If you're trying to change that, do you say, well, we'll invest billions and billions of dollars and we'll do it that way? Well, that wasn't possible. The city was broke. So instead what they did was identify one, this is where the zero tolerance idea comes from, which is used in schools and colleges and urban areas much now. That if we could get the detail right, was the argument, and we could stop it, we could change behavior. And the detail was graffiti. So the zero tolerance is you have a crack graffiti removal team that whenever the rolling stock's parked up every night, goes in there and it removes every bit of graffiti. And they did that systematically and ruthlessly for 3 months. And what happened? The whole behavior of the subway changed. People came back. They started paying money. The more money, you can upgrade that, et cetera, et cetera. So Gladwell's idea is that change is more like, or change in social sense is more like them reaching a tipping point. A bit like an influenza virus, when one person's got it, then 2 people, then 4, and then suddenly your whole team are away sick. Yeah? So it's that kind of, a bit, or another image that I use would be of the kind of duckweed on a pond. If it doubles every day, then the day before it's about to be totally covered, it'll be half covered. That's why noticing is important. 2 days before, it's going to be totally covered, it'll be a quarter covered. 5 days before, it'll be virtually invisible to the naked eye. Okay? So that's why, if you believe this, that's why this becomes rather important. Now, this first principle is taking a little longer because it's establishing a lot of ground here, I believe. So I'm arguing that it is helpful to try and anatomize what kind of change you're facing. It's good to have mental models that you can control, rather than, oh my dear, I'm just going to be a laggard, or I've got to persuade everyone to come around to... and it can happen quite quickly. Malcolm Gladwell concluded that the small detail is often the really significant thing. He looks at the birth of Sesame Street, by the way, as another example he cites, where the small detail there was Big Bird, was having the mixture of cartoon characters suddenly come out in your face and get you watching, and all the other educational stuff, the good songs with the good messages. And that was the detail that made that really fly. And the other thing he says is that it happens very, very quickly. And the third thing he says is it doesn't take many people, what he calls the law of the few. So he turns on his head the Rogers stuff. And I believe this passionately. There aren't hundreds and hundreds and thousands of expansive educators out there. There are a significant, small number of us, and we're beginning to get some traction. And I think in a network society, we can indeed do that. Back into the human mind just for a second, and those of you who know me will have seen this before too. How many of you can see what that creature is at a glance straight away? Just put a hand up if you can. How many of you can't see? It looks like kind of a lot of squiggles at the moment. Okay, about a third, two-thirds. Those of you who can, quick audio clue, please. This is a Geelong moo for you, okay? And there the cow for most people, but not all will appear. There's the nostril, eyes, etc., back. And it's pointing out how the human mind makes connections, okay? This is a powerful, powerful survival. It's what makes Homo sapiens thrive, isn't it? We don't have to do things like we did them yesterday. We can see a new connection, yeah? This is, if you like, creativity as in new ideas, as in invention. This is one powerful principle of the way the human mind operates. Here's another example, which, how many of you can see a woman at that window? Just put your hand up if you can. Okay. And look again and you realize there isn't one, is there? There's not a woman at the window. And you can see the clutter around the torso, which is space, the cat, the shelf, the pot plant, the curtain, the, shame on you fellows, wine glass, and then you lost it down here because these are her underwear swinging in the Geelong early morning breeze, yeah? So rationally, there's no woman at the window. Everybody up for that? How many of you can still see the woman at the window? Right, so second principle of the human mind is that the human mind is fickle, okay? It saw one thing one day, 2 nanoseconds later, that's the way it is, and, okay? Now, add to that behavior over time, and something else happens. So you now try and change things around you. If you offer me something, which if I bothered to look a second time, I would realize was not the problem you'd offered me yesterday, I still give you the same answer, okay? This is Einstein's clinical insanity, yeah? Doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result. Yeah, that's therein madness lies again. So you have to understand that principle. And by the way, isn't it lovely to hear the sound of 60 smug minds getting something wrong? Because the danger of over-certainty is smugness, isn't it? It's not being a learner, it's being confidently smug. Yeah, huff, huff. You know, you almost hear the harumph as well as the arm cross, yeah? There are lots of things that go along with these in terms of behavior. So, that was a long rant for the first one. Don't worry, it won't be as painful for the remaining 7. If you're thinking, oh my goodness me, it's still, no way, I've got to go at 3 minutes to 9. Okay, so if the first principle is that change is changing, then the take-homes from that are, well, yeah, that's true. So grow up. So how am I going to see that? How am I going to, what mental image? I'm aware of the fact that I both like the new, but I like certainty, I like routines. How many of you, when you get up in the morning, always do one particular thing first? You don't need to tell me what it is, but I bet you do. Whether it's going down to make a cup of coffee, going down and making your partner a cup of tea or coffee, letting the cat out, feeding the dog, brushing your teeth, starting in the bottom left hand and moving around to the right. I bet you, you'll find your life is, we are habit-making creatures, aren't we? Why do we do that? Because it's cognitively expensive. If you have to stop and think every new time, you go stir crazy. So that's why we need habits. So, second thing is, of course, that change as an abstract noun is hopeless. Change is what's happening in my guts. Change is deeply about the way, in fact, when I'm really stressed, I find it difficult to eat, don't you? You've got that kind of tightness in your stomach. And so there's not, Descartes was wrong. He was wrong about so many things, but he was wrong about the mind-body-heart split. We're holistic creatures, and hormonally and biologically and neurophysiologically and psychologically. And so the point here is that change is external, but what's really going on is a transition internally. In fact, William Bridges, the psychologist, puts it very nicely there, but I could equally have been talking about, say, Kurt Lewin, who has a lovely image for change. Kurt Lewin describes change as, imagine there's a block of ice, and then that ice melts during a period of change, and then it reforms when it freezes again over there. It's not the same block of ice. It's water, but it's frozen in a different way. And the scary bit is between there and there, isn't it? So the scary bit in change is where you feel you have least control about the melting. Yeah? That's the crazy times bit of change. So the more mental models we have for taking control of that, the better we are likely to thrive. So, enough of me talking. I want you to do something very quick just to see what it's like to be asked to do something that you don't want to do. Okay? So the purpose of this, did you get everybody to sign that disclosure form, Chanty, or not? The purpose of this is to have you experience at a silly level and not a painful level. It won't be too painful, other than the more introverted members of this group will not like this, just to let you know. The more extroverted will be doing it in a second, or probably before I've even finished laying it out. So what I'd like you to do is to play Opposites Day. Opposites Day is a strange planet. It sits just in a small part of a small hotel in Geelong. In that space, the following rules apply. Everything means the opposite. It's just simple, okay? So yes means no, up means down, etc. Everything means the opposite. Now that itself is not a simple thing to say, and that's part of the problem. I'm not going to repeat any of the instructions, by the way, and anybody who does not do this exercise willingly with a glad heart will be shot afterwards. So no pressure. Remember, I'm just trying to simulate being put in a position where you feel slightly uncertain, the rules are changing, and you've been asked to do something you don't know whether you want to do it. And the final thing, I just need to take your identity from you, if that's okay. So, is that all right? So, because that will really destabilize you, won't it? So, what I'd like is that you, whatever your current first name is, just put that in the bin for the moment, will you? And for this thought experiment, rename yourself with your mother's maiden name. That is your first name now. And your new second name is going to be any new name you care to give yourself. And so you've got new identity. The world is topsy-turvy. Everything means the opposite. And now I'm going to invite you to turn to your neighbours and for exactly a minute talk about the meaning of life using those rules. Go.